Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar entitled Making the Grade Social Media Best Practice for Universities 2022 and 2023. My name is James Bird, and I'm the Managing Director of SoCrowd, a leading social media management platform. I'm delighted to welcome our guest speaker, which we've plugged heavily over the last few weeks, social media expert Luan Wise. Good morning, Luan.
Good morning, James.
So in this webinar, Luan will outline her thoughts on the current social media landscape for universities and students. We'll also look at the key messaging required at different stages throughout the student recruitment journey. And most importantly, how to measure success. This session will be packed full of do's and don'ts, best practice examples to help you win the attention of prospective students. In terms of the format for the webinar, Luan will give a presentation for the first half of the session with some interactive polls to make sure you're engaging. We'll then head straight into a question and answer session. So please do submit your questions in the chat function. I know some of you have already done that in terms of sending them prior to the event, which is great. And we'll aim to wrap up promptly prior to 12 today. Just two quick intros before we start the presentation. First off, a bit of a plug around SoCrowd. We work with a number of different universities. We're a social media platform, and essentially we help you manage all your social media platforms from Twitter, LinkedIn to Facebook, all in one place. A lot of you have got multiple accounts and it's quite hard to manage, so we help you do that, which means that you've got better planning and scheduling, etc. And importantly, we give you the ability to report back the success of your social media. So we have an analytics tool which looks at all your LinkedIn, Twitter, how well you're doing. And then we have a listening functionality, which means that you can understand your audience and the trends that are out there in social media. If you'd like to find out more, go to our website, socrowd.com, and we're happy to give you a demo of the product. So beyond that plug there, I'm of course delighted to introduce Luan Wise. A bit of a background on Luan. She's an independent marketing consultant with over 20 years experience. She's worked with a number of higher education institutions across the UK. She provides training and support to students, academics and marketing teams. In addition to running her consultancy and training business, she apparently has enough time to be a LinkedIn learning course instructor, an accredited lead trainer for Meta, and an author of the award-winning book, Relax, It's Only Social Media. So a slight plug to go and get the book now if you want to learn all about the tactics of social media itself. So I'm going to hand over to Luan. I'm going to turn off my camera and I'll be back for the question and answer session at the end. Okay, Luan, over to you.
Brilliant, thank you, James. I'd say yes. Wait for the second edition of the book that I'm currently writing and working on. It should be out early next year. So let me just move things around on my screen, share my slides. Really good to see that we've got so many people here for this session. And as James said, yes, I've worked with nearly 20 universities in the UK over my career, from talking to students to marketing teams and academics as well. So what I'm sharing today really is my experiences, my observations of what's going on in your sector. This session is being recorded, so feel free to screenshot as we go. Feel free to pop questions in the chat. We'll come to those at the end, and you will get a copy of the recording afterwards. And James has shared their website address. I'm also really happy if you want to reach out and message me at any time with any questions or thoughts that you've got. So 45 minutes, I'll warn you, I've got a fair few slides to go through, but hopefully that means that it's packed with info and examples. And what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about Gen Z, their use of social media, some key trends, some data in here that I think you may find useful. Talk about the audience groups that are driving the HE conversations online. Some examples of content, which I call purposeful content. Things, messages, posts, graphics, you know, what is it that your audiences want and what will they engage with it? And as James said, it's really important that we talk about the measurements that matter. So just to put into context, and anyone from HE that's watching this, you already know this. You know your student recruitment journey. You know your key dates in the cycle. These are the key dates for 2023 entry. But really, I've put this on as a slide just to show that there's two things, isn't there, that you need to be thinking about. You know this, but it is the structure of your content on social media. It's what your audience that are going through this journey, if you can see on here, they're thinking, they're researching, currently they're going to open days, they're making decisions. When they've made those applications, whether that's in the next month for Oxbridge Medicine, Dentistry, Vet Science, or by January, they've made a certain set of decisions then it's waiting for the offers, and there's more decisions to be made all the way through to results day, and actually this time of the year as well. Are they actually going to show up? So you need to be thinking about them and what they need to know, what messages they need to receive, what questions they've got in their mind that you can be answering, all the while focusing on your key deadlines in your student recruitment journey, that you need data, you need conversations, you need applications, and first choices and insurance offers. So lots and lots to always think about in this journey. And I don't know of any other sector, I work across many, that actually has this structure of key dates and, you know, a big date in August where all your results, you know, matter, all your efforts over probably 2 years come to fruition. Can see some of you are already popping things in the chat. James is keeping an eye on that. As I talk, we will come to it, but I'd love you to use that chat, say hello to each other, share where you're from, but share with us what are the biggest challenges that you are all facing in higher ed social media right now. What's keeping you up at night? Pop those in the chat and we will have a look at them right now. I've made a couple of predictions for my slides, but I'm sure there's others that we can come back to in the Q&A part of the session. Okay, while you're doing that, I'll share the ones that I predicted you may post, may think about, the ones that I've seen that are coming up all the time. And I've wrapped this into top tips. I've put a few top tips throughout this slide deck for you. And my first one is perhaps some reassurance that less is more. I'm sure that you're trying to post lots of content. You've got lots and lots of social media accounts, but don't just throw content out there. It is okay to post less. It is okay to have less social media accounts and perhaps combine some and close some down. Throughout my career, I've probably closed down more social media accounts than I have opened them, just because there's audience overlaps, they're not maintained, they're not required. Less is more. So don't worry and think that you're going to come away from this best practice session going, I need to be doing more. Actually, I'd say rein it in and focus on quality. And if you need to have any conversations with your stakeholders, with your colleagues across the institution about this, about what you're doing, use data. Use data to present your case. And there are lots of tools and resources out there for identifying the data. I've got some benchmarks for you later on, but I'd always say if you can present with data, it really helps the conversations, sometimes difficult ones, that you might need to have. And some of those conversations are based around how many accounts that you have. And we know, I did a search yesterday with an institution, you know, many of you have 800 plus Twitter accounts that mention your institution name in the bio. Yes, there'll be academics, yes, there'll be students in there, but there is so many accounts created across universities. I urge you to think about the structure of the accounts you've got and think about putting your audience groups first, not your organizational structure. Probably don't need to say much more on that. And manage your resources and your FAQs with pinned posts and automated responses. I had a look through a number of accounts. I follow many universities, but I had a look through specifically when I was putting this slide deck together. And so I've got some tips for you on basic housekeeping more than anything. have a look at your header images, have a look at your about descriptions, have a look at your bios. Dare I say it, some of you have got outdated images and bios on your accounts. And I just find with the work I do with universities and other organisations as well, that really does make a difference. And using pinned posts can work really, really well. And an example from outside your sector, Superdry, is that by having this pinned post on their customer service account, which allows their customers to self-serve with their FAQs around delivery, shopping hours, returns, etc., they've reduced their one-to-one messaging. So have a think about your pinned posts. Have a think about automated messages. You may not need them on all of the time, but certainly out of hours. Can you put links to FAQs in your automated messages? Can you change them at certain times of the year when there may be resources that you need people to go to more towards deadline days or clearing, for example? Some people still have right now, they have got a pinned post, but it's still stuck on something from several months ago. They do need to be updated if you're using them. But I did find two great examples. James said I would cover do's and don'ts. I've tried to keep the examples in this slide deck positive, so don't worry, I'm only calling out what I think is some really good stuff. I'm not calling out any posts where I think there could have been improvements made. Two great pinned posts that are live last week, this week. Sheffield Hallam, my former university, posting that it's Welcome Week, and a video of the VC showing what to expect, see what's on, and a really nice link through to it. Similarly for Brighton, they changed this one just yesterday after I was having a look around, so I caught it early. Today marks the start of term. We're really excited to be welcoming students onto campus. Here's a reminder of what to expect. Really clear, really helpful content at the right time. Okay, let's move on to our audience. You know, what's important? Who are we talking to most of the time? This magic Gen Z. Born 97 to 2012, the 18-year-olds starting with you this month were born in 2004. So I had to look this up, but in 2004, Tony Blair was Prime Minister. Band-Aid was Christmas #1 with Do They Know It Was Christmas? And Facebook was invented. This was when Zuckerberg set it up in his dorm room, starting off with Harvard students, didn't come to the UK and open up wider for another couple of years, but they were born. Your 18-year-olds right now were born at the start of the evolution of social media. They were 3 years old when the iPhone was launched and 6 when Instagram was launched. We could probably do a whole session about Gen Z and their characteristics and their likes and dislikes, but you probably know them better than I do. There is lots of research around it. They started coming through your doors 2014, 2015, but as we know, the world has dramatically changed over the last 2 or 3 years. This is a generation that has been impacted by the pandemic, their social lives, their education. They are a generation and we need to understand them. And a brilliant resource for this, you may have seen it. If not, I urge you to have a look at the links we've put within the deck. There is a presentation, a 20-minute presentation, and a download PDF on this. This is the Freshers Report from UCAS, previously called the Student Lifestyle Report. It's been monitored now for 7 years. The next round of data collection happens in the next couple of months. The next report will come out March next year. But this report is great in telling us what social media platforms are our freshers using. And just 1% said they don't use any social media sites. And we can see that just through the duration of Gen Z years so far, there has been a huge shift in the social media platforms that they are using. Facebook has gone down. I will talk a little bit more about that later. Instagram has made a leap and has stayed at the top for the last 3 years. And another question in this report was, if you could only have one social media platform, what would it be? And the answer to that given was Instagram. We can see YouTube has been fairly steady for a few years. For me, this really highlights the importance of video content, and I've got a little bit more on that later. We have in here, you can see messaging apps. Freshers love these. Snapchat, you can't quite see it on your chart, but when you have a look afterwards, Snapchat is in there and steady, but a huge growth. You won't be surprised to know that over the last 2 years, coming up towards the end, it was in 53% position this year. I'm sure it will be higher next year, is TikTok, the most downloaded app over the past 2 years. Now, what's really interesting, obviously, looking at social media use, there is so many reports and data sets around this. The data will always say that even though if they had just one choice, it would be Instagram. We know people don't just use one platform. In fact, globally, people use on average 7 different platforms every month. And I found this report, a different one, the link is there. There's lots of charts in this report that are really insightful, but I found this one that shows just how much we use, or Gen Z use, but this will obviously other social media users, different times of day. We have a preference for channels at different times of day. We used to see these charts for waking up in the morning and listening to the radio, watching the TV, driving to work, listening to the radio, and different devices throughout the day as well. And I just think that this is something to understand, that people are using multiple platforms, the times of day, because it all gives context to the messages that we're putting out there for our Gen Z, for our other audiences that we're coming on to. Really interesting, isn't it, that we start with Instagram and that is steady, most used throughout the day and then drops late at night, and TikTok makes that surge to the late evening to come through. These are the main platforms that we've talked about, and of course one of the challenges is always that there are new platforms, other platforms, niche platforms that we need to be looking at to reach this generation and other audiences as well. So also from this report, I thought it was worth highlighting these up and coming social media platforms. I've been asked about these quite recently in terms of Discord, Reddit, Twitch. You may find, if you do further research on this, and particularly go and have a look at this report that's got lots of data around Gen Z social media trends, that sometimes there may be platforms that are used more by certain course areas. This could be more relevant to computing, for example. So you may also need to have a look and see if there's any niche areas that you can put into your activity plans going forward. What I do expect to be on the UCAS social media trends freshers report when it comes out in March will be real. I'd love to know in the chat if anyone has started using this personally yet, started thinking about how you might use it professionally. This is the app that has only launched in the past couple of years. It's a French startup. This is, I really wondered if the notification might go off during this session, so I'm going to keep an eye out for it. You get a notification from Be Real at any point during the day that says it's time to be real. This is where you have 2 minutes to share what you're up to. You have to just pick up your phone, take a photo around you. It also takes a selfie and you post it to your friends at the same time. It's liked because it's authentic and it's new. I've seen information that Be Real are starting to think about monetization. There is no advertising there at the moment, which I guess is also an appeal for new audiences. But just in case you're thinking about how could I use this as an institution, I came across an example from Chipotle, the restaurant, that they were using Be Real, and they were obviously ready for the notification to go off because their selfie was a fork and their image was an ad. It was their packaging with an offer code on there. So I think we'll start to see some more content come through on Be Real. But as I said, I'd love to know if anyone is using this, thinking about using it for their institution. It'd be great to share. Now, what happens, we know, if there's a new platform that people are getting involved with and new features, is what happens? Well, the existing platforms tend to copy it. And we have seen in the past couple of weeks that even TikTok have got into this now. It's usually Facebook, Meta, that start copying features, although they're similar across all of them. That TikTok have announced that they are introducing another way to create and connect content with TikTok Now, which is identical to Be Real. Sometimes people like this because they're familiar with the platforms and they want to do more with it. Other times, when there's feature updates and things start getting copied, people don't like it. And you may have seen over the past couple of months, led by the Kardashians, that there has been some backlash against Instagram. Their focus on video content and reels has sparked a revolt, as this headline shows, around stop trying to be TikTok. Now, I know this is just two examples, and one of the challenges of working in social media is just how many changes there are. Sometimes good, sometimes not so useful, sometimes interesting. We always need kind of one foot in the now and one foot in kind of what's going to happen next, because the users will be there and things will come through. If you are interested, a small plug for me, I do a weekly email update. It comes out on a Monday morning, a roundup of all the latest news headlines from all of the platforms, and that's the link if you wanted to subscribe. But despite Instagram, you know, kind of steady on there, and TikTok coming up and new platforms coming in, what I would wanted to mention today was, please don't give up on Facebook. I know you're adding more platforms to the mix and sometimes thinking, can we stop using these? And sometimes there are platforms that you could stop using or not use as much or change the way that you're using them. But we do hear rumours of Facebook is dead, Facebook is relevant, no longer relevant. But I would say right now, don't give up on it. This is just one report, and of course we can always find reports, but this was an interesting report. I put the link in there just, you know, a couple of weeks ago that says young users are still logging on to Facebook. They are still going there. They're seeing content. They're just spending more time in other apps. So it is really important to consider this mix of platforms that you've got. What are your audiences doing there? What are their behaviours, the times that they're on there? And all of that information is in your own insights. It will be in your own insights if you are looking natively or via a management tool such as SoCrowd. Okay, I've just been informed that the chat isn't working, but the question section is. So if you have got comments or questions to share, then pop them in the question section that should be down your panel. So I've talked a little bit about Gen Z and that audience and the platforms that they're using. But of course, and I know you know this, but it's always good to have a reminder, there are different audience groups. As a university, you have so many stakeholders. You have your colleagues, you've got prospective students to talk to across all the different courses and faculties and schools that you have available. You've got present students to communicate with, undergraduate, postgraduate, MBA, research. You've got employers and industry to engage with, as well as central and local government, media, professional organisations as well. There is a lot to do, I do understand that. But at the same time, we also need to recognise that while I've talked about Gen Z, that they also have multiple influencers. They have people around them that are impacted by their decision to go to university, that will influence their decisions, not just influence, but hopefully support them and guide them along the way as well. And we mustn't forget that in the social media activity that we're doing as an institution. So a couple of points along the bottom as action takeaways is as I've mentioned, use your insights to check the demographic profile of your own account followers right now. And if you're not sure if that's really aligns with the demographic profiles of the platform overall, my go-to resource is datareportal.com. It's updated quarterly with all the latest stats around social media platforms and their profiles. And I expect out of this, you will find, for example, that you have a younger audience on TikTok and Instagram, an older audience on Facebook, and a bit of a mix maybe on Twitter. But you need to understand your own audiences, because it will map back to what platforms do you use, what accounts do you have? Do you have multiple accounts on those platforms? It's far more involved than the couple of slides that I've shown you, but I'm sure that this is a consideration and something that you've spoken about, thought about, or maybe even need to review. So to have that in mind, and to make sure that you're still with us, we have a couple of polls around this. Here we go. The first poll: what's your primary platform for prospective students? Which out of the platforms shown here are the ones that you are using for your prospective students, your Gen Z? Okay, the majority is Instagram, with a few on Facebook. That's a really clear winner, isn't it, on Instagram there. Fascinating. And a second poll to ask the same question, but this time around your primary platform for that influencer group: parents, carers, and family. I think there's just a few more seconds to put your vote in for this one. See whether it's the same or different as for our Gen Z. Everyone voted? Okay. Much more of a mix this time, but bigger on Facebook, which matches what I said just a few minutes ago, that is perhaps an older demographic where you will find the parents and influencers. Some Twitter, none on TikTok. Maybe that will change over the future. Great. Okay. Interesting insights, something for everyone to think about. So halfway through, we will have time for Q&A. Higher education and social media is about three things. It's about building and managing your reputation, reaching your target audiences, as we've just seen, there is many of them, and it's about fostering meaningful engagement. This is a PDF download that is available from SoCrowd. I think the link will appear in the questions box, or we will send it out with a copy of the recording afterwards. And again, I've got some top tips on this for you. And one is, how can you do all of this? How can you get results and success from social media? Let people know what your accounts are. I know many of you have it in the footer of your website. Many of you are now launching on TikTok, have been using TikTok for a while, but it's not yet on your website footers. I've seen broken links as well when I've been looking through. So back to that housekeeping, just have a quick check on what is there and if it is working. But I particularly love these two examples. The University of Nottingham, if you go to their website, they've had this on there for quite a long time. I think they have a page called Social Media Hub. And as we know, your website footer would contain your core channels, but as we've said, there's many, many others. And Nottingham just make it really easy to find all of them. There's a link to all of those accounts. Probably accounts that aren't listed on there, but it's really easy to find and connect with Nottingham. via this page. And I also wanted to call out a post that Anglia Ruskin did on clearing on A-level results day, just to show us what was happening across their social media accounts. What was happening on Instagram, what was happening on TikTok, on Facebook and Twitter, so that you could engage in the different places, and it just let us know. And I just loved that post. You know, make it easy to find and tell people what's happening. Use your bio to say this account is for and when it's manned, and you know, and be really clear on your audiences for those accounts. And in terms of almost the business as usual content, your student recruitment content, I did look through quite a few, but I just wanted to call a couple out that appeared in my feed over the past few days related to the student journey, and you know, were just great posts, model posts almost, from the University of Hull, asking a question. What's the first step on the path to university? It could be as simple as getting our prospectus. Some bullet points about what the prospectus includes, how to go and find it with a link, and then a great bold image that tells me exactly what's going on. Now, in terms of don'ts, and I didn't want to call them out, but I see so many social media posts where there was one that talked about a course, and it was really quite interesting. You know, there's a great image of the course and what it was about, and some bullet points and why I might want to study it, and then there was no link. It's really easy, I know, when you're busy to kind of think that you're putting the information out, but you know, as a post, that just wasn't going to go anywhere. It wasn't going to deliver the results I needed if it was all about a course and I couldn't click on it. I also saw a really nice post that was encouraging engagement, and it just said, if you know, you'll know what to do. And I did know what to do, but actually I kind of thought, I know what to do, but you've made it really difficult for me because I'm going to have to go and search that for myself. If you'd have just put the links in there, I could have gone and done it straight away. You've made it difficult. It sounded interesting, you know what to do, but you haven't made it easy. And Nottingham Trent do some really lovely content on LinkedIn, which is, you know, a very different platform from where the students are. It didn't even appear on the UCAS results, but we know that LinkedIn has a business profile, is great for alumni as well. And this post from MTU was calling all MTU alumni, which I love. If you have an account that does communicate with multiple audiences, just calling them out like this is great. I love it. I think it's easy for people scrolling through to see what the post is about and to know whether it's for them or not. Then it asks another question: do you want to make a difference to the lives of students while developing your own skills and career? This is what we want from you. Find out more and get involved with a link. So just, I thought, 2 examples of content that has purpose for the prospective student or the alumni, and for the institution as well. You know, there's an action here and it's easy to do. I haven't done pages of these. We could obviously do a whole session on great examples, but I just wanted to highlight those points and this point of your content needing purpose and action and making it easy. Now, within that context of, you know, you're thinking about now promoting your prospectus, your open days and other activity at this time of year, is we do, of course, then need to work with the platforms and what we know is important for them and what's working best. We will find the answers as to what's working best, and I'll come on to measurements that matter in a few minutes, but there are also reports that can guide us. And again, you probably won't be surprised by the findings in this report from Hype Auditor. It was done in just July, where they analysed millions of posts on Instagram to see what kind of content was popular, was getting engagement, by how well it was being distributed in terms of reach, what engagement it was getting in terms of likes and comments. And images were performing well in green, carousels also performing well, reels, and then video. So it's no surprise. We know, you know, Instagram have told us that they are pushing reels right now, so they are getting the best reach and they are getting the most likes. but things can always change. So you need to keep an eye on the data, an eye on your own results, and then find the most effective way through for you. You've got to keep testing and keep learning. You know, this is what makes social media both exciting and a challenge. It is a never-ending experiment because the users, how they use it, the functionality provided by the networks, it's always changing. So we have to always pivot and optimize what we're doing. And I think it's important to understand that and to build that into our activity, that it's okay to test. It's okay to put something out there and perhaps it doesn't perform in the way we wanted to, but at least we tried it and we didn't just kind of stick with this is what we've always done and this is, you know, what's worked for us before, because it does change. The world around us change, the platforms change, our audience change, and it changes entirely throughout the journey as well. You know, it's an exciting stage at the moment, thinking about what course you might want to do, making your applications. In a few months' time, some decisions have been made, but there'll still be some wobbles and people need reassurance. So a few pointers there. And because this session is about best practices, what I really wanted to highlight to you is accessibility. 15% of the world's population experience some form of disability. We do live in a diverse world, so accessibility and inclusivity is really important. And just considering these factors will make your social media better, more effective, and more accessible and inclusive. And a very brief summary is to consider the font type and size that you're using. Don't try and use fancy fonts and trick the posts, because that can't be picked up by screen readers. So stick with the fonts and the text that the tools you're using will provide. Check for color contrast in any graphics that you're creating. Do include alt text with image descriptions. Captions if you're creating and posting videos, not just for people with disabilities, but also people with sound off that may want to read the captions instead. Hashtags are a best practice to include in your social media content. They help it get found, they help you measure it, they help give context to short posts, particularly on Twitter. But in terms of accessibility, it's about making the post readable. So ideally, put them at the end of the post. May it be trickier sometimes on Twitter where there's a character limitation, but if you can, put them at the end of the post and use camel case. That means uppercase where you would normally have a space. It makes it easier to read. Check your language for pronouns, check your imagery for diversity, and emojis. In the examples I've shown, just a couple of them, some of them did use emojis. They do work. Gen Z like them, other audiences like them, but do not use them to replace a core message. Screen readers won't pick them up. And limit them. Don't repeat the same emoji more than once, because again, it's not so accessible. And you may think that creatively this can be a bit limiting, but I wanted to share with you a post. We know we've probably all had conversations around this brand and what they do and how well they do it. But I wanted to show that even in alt text and, you know, this kind of making things more accessible, that you can still keep your brand tone of voice. And that is really important as well through everything that you're doing. An image, and actually an image of their product, which is sometimes unusual, but their description. This is a picture of our biggest ever bottle of orange juice with 3 glasses next to it, showing that this bottle is perfect for happy families. It's on an envelope with some papers inside. And if you zoom right into the papers, you'll see that they're divorce papers, which is a really funny joke considering the copy in the post is talking about happy families. It's very innocent, but I just wanted to highlight as well this tone of voice that needs to come through your content. So for me, that is a do. Okay, measurements. The less glamorous side of social media, if we think that it is glamorous in any way, the perhaps less creative side, the activity that sits below the surface of the iceberg that people think that social media is all about. You know, social media is the most measurable marketing channel, one of the most measurable, but also one of the hardest, one of the most difficult to assess and prove ROI, to prove impact. But there is so much data, and for me it's about looking for the data that matters. And I've got two criteria for this, quite simply. I'm going to talk through these measurements, but in terms of what matters, there's two criteria. Does it help me achieve my objectives, which assumes that I have objectives set and that I'm following them, but is it about objectives and allowing me to know whether I'm achieving them, or a stepping stone to achieving them? And also, if I see a measurement, do I know what to do with it? Is it just a number or a chart, or do I know what I need to do next? And in terms of that, I use the simple process of thinking about what do I need to stop doing, continue doing, and start doing. And that's what I'm looking for in data. But the data that you may be asked to report on and want to work around is followers, reach and impressions, engagement, website traffic, and event signups. So I've briefly got a few slides and then we'll be ready for any questions. Edurank, if you haven't yet got a free account with edurank, I would suggest you go and have a look. It's edurank.net, I believe. You can sign in with your university.ac.uk email account. When you do that, you will get to see insights for your own institution's core accounts, and you will also get to see some benchmarks. Now, I've included these numbers so that you can see what the benchmarks and the leaders are right now in terms of followers. The leading institution in the sector is Oxford, with those huge numbers of followers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. edurank does also include YouTube. It doesn't include LinkedIn, but I believe that they will be adding TikTok at some point. So just useful to have benchmarks, but I would also say benchmark against your own data and be looking for improvement. Reach and impressions. This can be an important number. People will ask you about this, and there is a slight difference. Reach is the number of people that see your content. Impressions is the number of times your content is displayed. So very often impressions will be higher than reach. And unfortunately, reach isn't your number of followers, because as we know, the algorithms doesn't show everything every time to the followers. So it can be useful to have a look at the reach and impressions around your content as well. And in terms of best practice, if your content is shareable and people are sharing it, that will help you increase the reach and impressions as well. The measurement that's most often talked about and is the aim, I guess, is not just reach and measurements, but engagement. People engaging with your content. That's likes, comments, shares, retweets. These are the sector benchmarks in terms of engagements per month. And these were from August, so these are the latest edurank figures. And I'd actually noted these down for a previous project I was working on in October last year. And these benchmark numbers now from August are massively down from last October. October, Facebook, actually not a huge difference, just 10. But on Instagram in October last year, engagements were 10,000 plus. So if you do think your content is getting less engagements now than before, that is the same across the sector. Also do consider that not all engagements are positive. Your post may get comments and reactions, and it's not always a positive thing. So sentiment could be something that you're looking towards as well. But ultimately, your engagement should be focused on, is it meaningful? Is it developing your relationship in some way with your prospective student, with the influencers around them? Engagements overall can be useful in terms of a benchmark, but we saw that Oxford have got many more followers than perhaps some of you have got. So sometimes that comparison isn't fair. And I would prefer to personally use an engagement rate calculation, which is based on your number of engagements divided by your total number of followers times 100 to get a percentage. Now, some people use impressions rather than followers. Personally, I go for followers, but as long as your measurements are like for like and consistent and you are looking for continual improvement, I personally prefer looking at engagement rates as a percentage rather than the raw numbers. Now, all of your data actually within social media and the activity you're doing on the platforms is important and useful, and it's impactful on the bigger objective of student recruitment. But there are, of course, other things that you're doing. We saw in those examples that I shared that there was website links, so that's important. If you are using any website links, I just want to urge you to make them trackable. And one way of doing that, you're likely to be doing this already, but a reminder to use UTM parameters. Maybe you need to speak to someone in your data teams to understand how to best set these up, but they're free and easy to set up. They have a structure to them shown in that graphic. And just as an example of a UTM is the one that I was using to promote this event, where we would be able to track which website traffic came from the links I was sharing versus other people sharing. My encouragement here is to make sure that if you are sharing a UTM link, that you shorten it so that it doesn't look as messy as that one does. And ultimately, another measure, really important, what many of you are focusing on at this time of year, is event sign-ups. It is your open day. In case you're wondering, this is a screenshot from University of South Wales. It's sometimes followers are important, reach is important, engagement rates is important, but ultimately you need people to come to open days. You then need to wow people on open days and then keep them and keep communicating with them all the way through. So do recognise the bigger picture of the student recruitment journey and how your social media content is impacting that. Make sure that you include those calls to action, because again, I've seen open day posts when I've been looking around going, you know, our open days are just around the corner with a link. And that's great, but I've actually got to click that link and go through that website and probably download a form or, you know, fill in a form rather to see when that open day is. Open day is just around the corner. It's happening in 2 weeks on October the 2nd. Don't miss out the vital information that's just going to make things really easy for your followers. The final slide, so I have left time for questions. I know this was fast. Hopefully there's some tips for all of you to take away. But if I was rounding them up, I would say regular housekeeping. I've seen this for myself. I didn't want to call people out, but do check your bios. Do they make sense outside of your own world? Or your header graphics up to date? Have you got pinned posts? And if you have, are they up to date? And do they help people self-serve? Remember, it's not just about Gen Z. There are other people involved in the decisions, influencing the decisions. Your audiences are all using different platforms in different ways, so you may need to spend some time thinking about your channel selection for different audience groups and nuancing your content across your different accounts as well. Don't forget the call to action in your post. You might think that it feels a bit salesy to be doing that and not the nature of the platform, but ultimately you do have objectives to reach. You do want people to do things, so it doesn't have to be as blatant as apply now. You may want to do that towards the deadline in January, but just ask questions, get people involved, build your community and your relationships and your trust, as well as getting those open day signups and those website traffic visits. Focus on those metrics that matter. If you need to have any internal discussions, always use that data and keep testing and keep learning. James.
Thanks so much, Luann. That was really interesting. Lots of insight there for us to take away, particularly around the measurements and analytics at the end. There's a series of questions that have been submitted by people in the audience. We've also had some before. So I'll kick off with one which I thought was quite interesting, which is it a good idea to invade all platforms that students use, social platforms that is, or should we leave them some space away from higher education?
There's there's a few facts. My answers will always be it depends. I'm never going to be able to do a straight yes or no answer to this. I know that you are all limited on time and resources. So I would rather any social media marketing team does a few things really well than tries to stretch themselves too thinly and be everywhere and misinformation and not be in the right place at the right time and not have an impact. So focus, start with your objectives, do 2 or 3 things really well. But remember, I think what I'm seeing and for myself when I'm looking through the channels, but also working with marketing teams, you don't need to do everything yourselves. This is where you can get your student ambassadors involved, and that works really well on TikTok, and I'm sure is going to be what's coming through on Be Real as well. So perhaps it doesn't all need to be centrally driven. You can perhaps know that you have a presence, you can know what you want to achieve from a platform, but in terms of kind of content creation and being there and showing up, doesn't all have to be kind of centrally led. Get those student ambassadors involved, and then it will feel more natural on the platform as well. I had a great discussion yesterday around how TikTok ads kind of stand out a mile because they're just not authentic. They're not, you know, TikTok style, and they will say for themselves, you know, create TikToks, not ads. So sometimes we need to work with others to have a presence on the platform, but focus on your objectives and don't stretch yourself too thinly. You know, you've only got a finite set of resources, so do some things really well.
That's great, thanks, Joanne. There's another point around negative comments. What's your top tips for managing those negative comments, particularly in light of universities, their freedom, academic freedom of speech? There's more negativity that's come across on some platforms. How should we best deal with that, do you think?
Yeah, this could be a whole session in itself as well, James, but I think there's a few things here. Internally, in terms of your academics, and not just academics, any member of staff, it would be important to have a social media policy, offer them some training, offer them some insights and support if they're going to be active on social media. That would be one place to start. The other area of course is, have you got listening and monitoring set up to be aware of these negative comments that are perhaps coming through? You know, it may be out there before you even know about it if you're not monitoring it for yourself. So that's really important that you've got that listening, those tools set up so that you can be aware of it very early on. And when there is an incident, you know, anyone that's got the notification set up, you know there's something happening because your phone starts buzzing. I've seen it around events, I've seen it around competitions being hacked and things like that. So you've got to be set up for the listening and monitoring. You know, you've got to kind of be prepared for some sort of crisis. Being prepared is then the other answer. I'm sure you were all prepared for Operation London Bridge, and it didn't come as a big surprise of what actions needed to be taken a couple of weeks ago, but that was certainly a crisis that you could plan for and be prepared for. But again, the timing of it wasn't known. I know that some of you had open days and had to make quick decisions around what you were doing or what changes need to be made. And that's my point then, is that it's about looking at any comments you're receiving or preempting any comments that you might receive and managing them quickly, doing a holding statement, doing an acknowledgement, and then trying to take it off the public domain into perhaps private messaging as well. So plan for your crisis, scenario plan, role play them, but you've got to be monitoring so that you can actually jump in as and when you need to.
Get planning. Okay, we've got another question around, obviously it's really important in terms of getting the prospectus across online on social media. What's your view on using infographics over images or the other way around? What's the best method?
I was talking to, I ran a workshop in the past week, and we talked really interesting about how a few years ago we were moving print onto web, you know, and it was almost a translation, wasn't it, trying to create a brochure website by taking your prospectus, and things have moved on from that. And you know, we do need to understand the platforms and how people consume content on the platform, which very often is on a mobile. particularly with our generations and the downtime that people may be looking for this kind of information. So we need to consider that it's mobile friendly. Infographics are really popular and do work really well. I would just say don't pack them with too much information in a small space of area so that people can't actually read what they are. But there will be certain types of content that will be really relevant for that in terms of your probably employability stats, your graduate employment stats, or all the Guardian and Times results that came out over the last week where you kind of want to put some numbers around it. So yes to graphics, but just make sure that they work within the context of the scroll.
Perfect, thanks, Luann. And then what's the number one mistake you see social media marketers make in higher education?
Can I just reassure and say, I know that this is a massive job. Anyone that takes responsibility for social media for such large audiences and large institutions, you know, I take my hat off to you. But what I do see is that very often, and this is not just the people involved with social media, and you know, this is across other organizations as well, is that social media is often seen as the afterthought, the thing that happens at the end. You know, prospectuses will go out, campaigns will go out, open days will be organized, press releases will go out for research, and then it's like, oh, and now we need to put it on social media. I'm sure anyone that's really focused on social media would be nodding and say, can we try and get this earlier into the conversation? Can you involve us in the planning and the preparation and the content ideas so that we're not kind of at the end of the process and the add-on, that social media is included at the beginning. We can think about what we might need to measure, how social media can have an impact and support, rather than it kind of being, oh, and we need to.
Perfect. And then final question, if people were to take away one key learning from this webinar, what would it be?
One, I would say, having looked at the accounts, you will all get a really quick win by just logging into your accounts after this session, just checking those header images and the bios and your links. I'm sure everyone will have at least one action and a quick win just by doing that. Fresh eyes.
Perfect. Thanks ever such, Luann, for doing this today. It's been really insightful. We've had lots of people on board, lots of questions in there. So we are going to email around the link with the video to this webinar. You'll also get the deck, so you can look through that as well. If you would like to demo the product at SoCrowd, obviously give us a shout, but it leaves me to wish you all the best over this busy time as a university with all that's going on. Thank you very much for attending, and if you have any questions, do pop them in the questions thing here. We can answer them separately via email if you wish to. But thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.